Are you the quantum mechanics?
Yes, we're the Quantum Mechanics. We're the paranormal podcast for the believers, the doubters, and everyone in between. And Ben, we've got a bit of an announcement, don't we, this week?
Oh yeah, we're moving up another level.
So we just launched our Patreon program. It's a way that you can help support us and keep the podcast going and hopefully make it even better, right?
Yeah, it'll just help, like, with the costs of the books that come through the door every day, and the equipment, and some more adventures.
Yes, definitely, because we do provide the podcast for free, but outside of our time commitment, we do have a few expenses going on, don't we? So for equipment, we've just spent the last 10 minutes trying to kind of get our cables to work because they're so old. And nobody can see this, but our mics are currently being held together with hairbands.
They're good mics, but whoever designed them didn't imagine how to hold them properly. So yeah, they are hairbands. Yeah, MXL 990s for the geeks amongst you.
Yeah, with hairbands. I mean, they kind of work, but if you become a patron, it helps us with the cost of equipment. As Ben said, books and subscriptions for our research. And we want to do a few more field trips like we did the other week. But again, there's a cost to that. And of course, we have to pay for the platform subscriptions to store and publish the podcast. So if you want to become a mechanic and help us, there are links on our Podbean, Facebook, Twitter and YouTube pages to our Patreon site. Depending on your platform, also within the podcast show description, some of them do show links and some don't. So it depends where you listen to your podcast. Or you can just go to patreon.com/TQM pod. And we've worked out, we try to keep it as low as possible. We worked out it'll cost you about £1 an episode to support us, but that will make a big difference to us. And we'll be adding some exclusive Patreon-only stuff soon as well. So please go to patreon.com/TQM pod now and help us out by becoming a paranormal patron. Many thanks.
Yeah, very much. And if you can, it'd be great, but completely understand cost of living. If you can't, no worries, but every little helps, as somebody once said.
Yeah, definitely. It just helps to keep us going. And yeah, we're we're not going to be driving Lamborghinis. We're going to plough anything we get back into the podcast. So yes, any support, go to patreon.com/TQM pod, and if you can help us out, that'd be great. Thank you.
Right, on with the topic. I mean, we won't do a weather check, but I will say last week was really fun. I mean, I wasn't expecting the stones to move, but that little experiment we had, that was quite interesting.
It's weird you say that, because when I was putting the YouTube version together, I was kind of putting some of the drawings that we did alongside the targets that we'd set. So if anyone's not listened to that episode, we did spend a night at the Hoarstones in Enston. And while we were there, we did some remote viewing tasks, set ourselves some psychic tests. It was funny listening back to it and putting together the YouTube version. I kept going, oh, that bit's weird. We didn't really pick that up on the night. But it's hard to know with it whether we're kind of post-rationalising after the event. But there was some weird stuff there. I think we got closer than we probably gave ourselves credit for on the night.
I think so. I think it's very, very difficult when you're doing it to kind of look at the target objectively and look at what you drew. But I don't know. It's a weird one. Anyway, have a look and see what you think.
It did make me think, Ben. In a way, we've never really done a proper one. That was the shortest one we've ever done. Do you know what I mean? I think my one, I had like 15 or 20 minutes to do something. Even when Daz Smith set us a target, we probably spent an hour on it, or I did at least. So it would be good to do a proper one and kind of live with it for a week or so and see where we got to, see if that makes a difference, whether this all that stuff about the signal and the noise, whether it gets clearer and we can go through it. I think some of you out there did get in touch on social media and said, oh, if you ever set a kind of target for the Quantum Mechanics listeners, we'd love to kind of do it. So we may do that in a few weeks. We may do a little target for anyone who fancies it out there to have a crack at, but we won't do that this week, but we might do that in the near future.
Well, it's funny because if you had to choose one psychic remote viewer who was the most famous, it's pretty obvious, right?
It is. I mean, I would have thought the remote viewing, I was going to call them geeks, but that's really unfair, might not agree. But I always think of the Uri Geller tests, and the grapes always comes to mind.
Yeah, exactly.
I know that's not pure remote viewing, but yeah, if you're going to... The psychic spy program, Uri Geller's probably the headline act.
Well, do you remember when Trump was in power all those years ago, and he was releasing the papers on the killing of JFK?
Yes.
And a lot of people might have missed this. I certainly missed it at the time. Uri Geller did an interview with ITV about this. This is 2017. And he says that he was employed by the CIA to use telepathy to help investigate the killing 10 years after the killing of JFK.
Oh, I didn't realise Uri was involved.
No, nor did I. And he's quoted as saying, he said he came to a stunning conclusion. He says the CIA were not involved, nor the FBI, nor Lyndon Johnson. What I found out was so stunning that I handed my information to a CIA agent. And he says, I wonder if that will be revealed today. But he said, if it doesn't, he won't talk about it again.
If it's not revealed.
If it's not revealed, he will never talk about it.
I've got aliens going through my mind. They're the only ones left.
Well, he actually said it would send shockwaves through international politics. That's were the words that he said.
It wasn't Rick Astley, was it?
Oh, well, you've just ruined the show.
Right, that's the end. Thank you for listening.
No.
I'll tell you what, though, if it was Rick Astley, I'm never going to give him up.
Oh, my God. That's what the whole song is about.
Yeah.
But I thought, I want to find out what that might be. I wonder if anyone wrote about it.
So let me just recap. So Uri did some psychic work on who assassinated JFK.
Yes.
Came to a very unusual conclusion or shocking conclusion, never revealed. He was hoping or thinking Trump might let it come out when he released the JFK papers. Is that where we're at?
That's where we're at, yes.
Cool. Right.
So just as a reminder, Kennedy killed November 22nd, 1963. So I was hunting around for if anybody could shed some light on what it might be that Uri knows. Then I found this stunning book called Operation Dragon. It's written by James Woolsey, who's former Director of Intelligence. Do you remember?
Yeah,
do you know that name?
Yeah, that name rings a bell, yeah.
He's a member of the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Amongst other things, he's also a founding member of the Set America Free Coalition, which is an international body which promotes democracy around the world. And he's also a global strategic security advisor for somebody called Booz Allen Hamilton, which is that is a security thing. You know, it's a pretty big name.
Right.
And he co-wrote this book with former Romanian acting spy chief, Lieutenant General. Here
we go.
Ion Mihal Pacepa.
Perfect.
Who was granted political asylum to the US in 1978. And what they reveal in this book, I'm just going to take you on a bit of a journey because I've never heard anything quite like it before, coming from two such respected people. And the reason why this is on a paranormal podcast, not because it's so closely related to Uri, but because it reveals how easy it is to keep information away from people when the powers that be don't want you to see it.
Okay.
And I've got my eye on the UFO community here. So, the book sort of starts with just giving us a bit of a history lesson on the relationship with Russia. And to be honest, I had never really understood why America is so fixated, why the Cold War happened. So there's a few bits and pieces which you will know from your history classes. So, for example, in the Second World War, the US put 4 million men and women into defeating the Germans, and they were on the side of the Allies, defeated Nazism, right? We all know this happened. And along with that, they dropped the bombs on Japan, and basically then smuggled some of the technology out of Germany and the Nazi Axis powers. So as the Second World War comes to an end, they make this grand claim, but I think we do, this is, again, something you could learn in history. It took America's nuclear technology and built the world's largest stockpile of nuclear and bacteriological weapons, and the world's second largest fleet of ballistic nuclear missile submarines.
Yeah.
And in fact, the other sort of scary thing about it is both men say that Russia remains largely a mystery to America, but it is a puzzle that we assume has gone away in terms of its danger. Because if we assume that at the end of the Second World War, it has collapsed, it's the Wind of Change song. That's what we all assume has happened.
Yeah.
Until recently,
I'm seeing the Hoff in a shiny jacket with bulbs on it. That's what I remember.
Yeah. Yeah, oh my God, yes.
It was the Hoff that did it.
Well, we think that the modern era of Russian aggression, since the Cold War started, probably with the Ukrainian crisis. But they do make the point that in 2014, Russian Moscow State Television announced with a fanfare that they could turn the US into radioactive ash, and they started talking about EMP weapons and this sort of thing, and saber rattling. And you might say, why am I saying all this? This doesn't, again, sound very paranormal. This is just setting the scene for reminding us that there is an ideological and dangerous clash between Russia and America. Really, this is what we're talking about.
And that's reminding me of Reagan and the Star Wars program. That always fascinates me, that they've got a weapon system up in space, which they didn't have, but they managed to convince the Russians that they did, which, many people believe led to the, collapse of the Berlin Wall and everything that happened since. That was almost, as far as we know, just one big bluff. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
the stakes were pretty high, and everybody was trying all kinds of stuff on both sides, right?
Yeah. Well, this is why they've got such big intelligence communities. That's why it's so important that the authors of this held the positions that they did. Well,
it's quite, by the sounds of it sounds like they've set up the book to people who were probably at the time on opposite sides of the fence during that period. Is that the premise of the book?
Yes, that's why he had to have political asylum.
Right.
So to get this story underway about what Operation Dragon is, it really kicks off when Stalin decides to form a pact with Adolf Hitler, who during the Second World War was the biggest threat to Russia, of course. Yeah. They signed a non-aggression pact, but Hitler double-crossed him and suddenly and without warning invaded the Soviet Union on June 22nd, 1941, in something called Operation Barbarossa. And it was at that point the crisis pushed Stalin to consider the fact that Americans had many brilliant Nobel Prize scientists working on game-changing weapons, while the Soviet Union had no scientists of that caliber. And to catch up, he set about trying to steal and copying the technology, ordering his chief intelligence officer to get cracking on the operation.
Right.
So this is kind of the first time what we see, like something. This isn't outright warfare. This is like we're going to go and steal and repeat this thing to give us an advance.
So that's proper start of Cold War spying, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And this gave the Russians the power to be able to challenge America after the Second World War using their own technology. And he then says, right, this is where the bomb drops. For 57 years, we've had irrefutable evidence showing that Nikita Khrushchev and his political police were involved in the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
Right.
This overwhelming evidence was posted in the 26 volumes of the President's Commission on the Assassination of President Kennedy, but few, if any, have been able to understand its significance. The reason? It's because this evidence is codified and had never been jointly analysed by a top US intelligence leader and a former Soviet spy bloc familiar with the KGB patterns and codes.
Right.
And it took us years to do this. So basically, you're aware of the Warren Commission and everything that was set up to investigate JFK's killing. The evidence, they claim, was staring them in the face that this was a operation that was conducted by the Soviet Union. But because the codes, literally the codes, were misunderstood by both sides. Well, sorry, it was misunderstood by America, and the other side didn't have a chance to, they weren't going to say what they were.
You got it wrong.
Yeah. He says, decoded. This evidence also proves that Oswald's KGB support officer in the United States, Baron George de Montchild, who had changed his biography 3 times, was in fact a Soviet illegal officer. That was because his name was so difficult to pronounce.
Yeah.
It also documents that he committed suicide the day before he was scheduled to testify about Oswald to Congress, and that he left behind a manuscript dedicated to Nikita Khrushchev, the last Soviet leader to whom he would have sworn allegiance as a KGB officer.
Right.
So, what kind of evidence are we talking about here? So, if we assume that Oswald was a KGB plant, which is what we're assuming so far in the book and the story, and some of the evidence was taken and put forward into the President's Commission, what is it that we were missing? Well, the first piece of evidence that the book presents us with is he calls it decoding the ink, the secret ink, and there's a letter in here. It's called the Walker Note, and it was left for his partner on April the 10th, 1963, just before shooting at US General Edwin Walker. The Walker Note contains two PGU operational codes, and these 2 codes, so this is intelligence codes from the Russians. The codes are, the first one is Red Cross, which means financial help, and the second one is Friends, which is code for support officer. And he's basically saying in this note, basically our friends are around, and if you go to Russia, the Red Cross will help you out. So basically, this is a code for you should go to Russia because you will be supported financially.
And this was an assassination attempt that predates Kennedy.
That predates
right?
Kennedy, yes. So the other thing about this this evidence and how it was missed is they call it the KGB pattern. And he points out, like, espionage. We all think of espionage of, I don't know, holes cut in newspapers and ink made out of lemon juice. That's how I think of espionage, really, because, that's what we grew up with. Things like Inspector Gadget.
Yeah.
Type
or
of things.
secret messages in stones, I always think about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That you can basically unravel the stone and there's a message in there, yeah.
But he describes it as espionage being an accumulation of one-time operations. So a one-time recruit, a one-time agent meeting, a one-time theft, written in codes and carried out based on certain tried and tested true patterns rooted in the tradition of each other's espionage organisations. So it's basically some actions, but they're sort of they're codified, but they happen usually once because that's just the nature of the business. So one little element of 2 people meeting once in ever can change the whole course of an operation, or could be the entire operation.
Yeah, get it.
So yes, a repetitive process like serial killing or serial bank robbery. And it's because of this misunderstanding of the codification of the 2 sides is why it gets missed. So the KGB have their side of doing things, the CIA have their side of doing things. And if you don't fully understand how the other side do it, and you never will, unless you're a double agent and you can, give enough information to the other side. But even then, you won't understand the full extent of it. It's like looking at the foot of a giant without ever having climbed above the cloud to look at the head. That's the problem.
Right.
So just because he mentions Khrushchev, I think it's interesting to cover the end of Khrushchev quickly, because this comes into it. So in reality, Khrushchev himself was apparently quietly arrested by the KGB a few months after the JFK assassinations, and he never again became a free man. On October the 12th, 1964, when Khrushchev and his close friend Anastas Mikoyan returned to Moscow from a long vacation, the KGB chairman was waiting for him at the airport, and he told Khrushchev that he was under arrest and asked him not to resist. A few days later, the Politburo quietly accused Khrushchev of harebrained schemes, hasty decisions, actions divorced from reality, briggadocchio, which I'd never heard of before.
That sounds good.
It means basically, it's another word of saying he was sort of boastful and harebrained.
What was that again?
Braggadocio.
Can you do the fandango?
And for the rest of his life, Khrushchev was kept under house arrest. And of course, now we're beginning to uncover the elements. This is why he had pushed it so far that he'd ordered the killing of JFK,
right,
using an agent that even his own people said, you have come too far.
It's always a bad sign when you get back off holiday and the head of the KGB's waiting at the airport. You got to know that something's up, right?
Well, it's unbelievable that we don't know this. I was never taught this in history class.
No.
It even goes so far as, so he's not buried inside the Kremlin wall. The Soviet government even refused to pay for his gravestone.
Wow.
There's only a small, insignificant marker identifying it. So this whole sort of notion of that there is... it was Oswald was just a man all by himself, just a lone agent,
yeah.
And all of these letters and pieces of correspondence which were sort of taken into account, it was all missed. It was all missed. Decoded, this evidence, as he points out, proves that Oswald's KG support officer was directly controlled by the Kremlin, and there was. It was an operation which was ordered and pushed ahead, even though quite a lot of the Russians didn't want it to happen, and therefore arrested their own leader when they found out he did it. It's extraordinary. It's absolutely extraordinary, and everything from being sort of having these clandestine meetings to being trailed and marked by KGB agents. It doesn't come through in the official report. It's like we can't admit that this is what had happened.
Right.
Because if you admit that Russia killed an American president, this is what Uri, I think, might have been referring to.
Because I guess you've got the whole Cuban Missile Crisis, haven't you? And I remember talking to, my parents and people who kind of went through that, and so Russia moves these nuclear missiles into Cuba, which is what, few miles off the coast of America. People thought it was going to be, the end of the world. I mean, we had probably had a little bit in the kind of Reagan Thatcher years with, I remember being taught duck and cover and all that stuff, and you kind of thought, God, we could all be killed in nuclear strikes. The paranoia for us then, imagine what that was like during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And then if it had come out that the Russians had assassinated Kennedy, oh God, can you imagine what had happened then?
It's almost like even nuclear war wouldn't be sufficient then, because what you get, I mean, it's almost to be a pointless war. What it says is America is pretending to be impenetrable when it isn't.
Yeah.
But it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop there. This is the thing that really got me, because I've sort of heard some stuff like that before, but not from such incredible sources.
Yeah.
But this one is confirmed by both the sources that write this book and what they sort of say, and other people that we've spoken to since. Mikhail Gorbachev was recruited by the KGB to spy on his classmates in the 1950s while he was studying law at Moscow State University. and he interned in Lubyanka, the KGB headquarters, where he was trained by a very prominent individual, Uri Andropov, who was the first head of the KGB. And he was groomed to sit on, as they describe it, the Kremlin throne. Both had begun their careers in Stavropol. Andropov arranged for Gorbachev to be appointed to the Soviet Politburo. One Gorbachev biographer called him the Crown Prince. Once in the Kremlin, Gorbachev and the KGB transformed what they had previously sort of was a rough idea. They turned glasnost into a political catchword that was picked up by the rest of the world. We all remember glasnost, don't we?
Yeah, yeah.
So glasnost in the early days of the KGB, it was simply regarded as a disinformation tool. In the 1930s, the official encyclopedia, Soviet encyclopedia, defined the word glasnost as a spin on news released to the public. Gorbachev did not intend to transform the Soviet Union into a liberal democracy. This is a point he made clear in books, speeches, and even official pronouncements. Neither did any of his historical predecessors, nor, as the authors put it, has any other Russian leader since the fall of the Berlin Wall. The idea that Russia loves the West and wished to emulate its political institutions was a self-indulgent fantasy peculiar to intellectuals in Western nations. Gorbachev intended to save himself from his privileged circle in Russia's authoritarian structure from what they all knew to be communism's impending political and economic doom. In this, he succeeded in the 1970s. So basically, what they're saying is they could see the fall of communism coming, and Gorbachev was put in there to form this sort of central group of people who would be pulled through it. But the way to do that is to insulate themselves from what the rest of the world are seeing and change. So glasnost, it's not freedom, it's this is what we want you to know.
It's almost like some kind of corporate gloss.
It's corporate gloss.
Right.
Probably
with a little bit of realism that, to quote Bob Dylan, the times they are a-changing, but we don't want them to change that much, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what... you couldn't put it better than Margaret Thatcher prominently endorsed Gorbachev's glasnost in the 80s. Later, she conceded that the role of Mikhail Gorbachev, who failed miserably in the declared objective of saving communism in the Soviet Union, had been absurdly misunderstood. So I told you I'd get Uri Geller and Margaret Thatcher all into
You did.
into one.
This was how you teased this with me. That's quite good going.
For 56 years. So that sort of... Now you understand, even Gorbachev, because until I read this, I thought, Gorbachev was just... He was a good guy. Shame that we've got what we've got now. No, it's all the same.
Yeah.
For 56 years, most of the world has believed that JFK was murdered by an American. Most of the world has been told that the CIA, the FBI, right-wing businessmen, and the Italian mafia were all involved. Yeah. It is a lie. Set off 56 years ago by the KGB's worldwide disinformation campaign, Operation Dragon. JFK was not killed by the American government. He was killed by a concerted KGB disinformation operation to divert attention away from the KGB's extensive connections with Kennedy's killer, Lee Harvey Oswald. And Lee Harvey Oswald was a 24-year-old American Marine infatuated with Marxism who defected to Moscow in 1959, returned to the US 4 years later with a Russian wife given to him by the KGB, who shot President Kennedy and was arrested by the Texas police force.
And shot.
Beating the Warren Commission report to the stores by several weeks, the first book to be published by the Kennedy assassination, about the Kennedy assassination, was called Oswald, Assassin or Fall Guy, by former German Communist Party member. Oh, God, why have I got so many of these names?
Go on, have a go.
Joachim Yosten, I think.
Okay, that sounds good.
Without providing any evidence whatsoever, it alleges that Oswald was an FBI agent provocateur with a CIA background. It was, in essence, the KGB's first round at sowing the disinformation.
Okay.
This was the first thing they did within a week.
Right.
And then there's another bit, which is kind of, this bit is this is tricky to for me to get my head around anyway. But Oswald was recruited by Soviet Foreign Intelligence, the PGU, when he was serving in Japan. This is what we just heard. What feels hard for people to swallow, however, I preempted it, is that another PGU department subsequently trained Oswald as an assassin and so thoroughly brainwashed him that not even the PGU itself could deter him from accomplishing his very secret and special mission for Khrushchev.
So basically, he had all this training, but the implication of what you're saying is the people who trained him either didn't know or couldn't dissuade him from carrying out this almost secret mission for Khrushchev. Is that,
he was
the implication?
Yeah, well, he was trained by one lot, and then another lot
said,
turned him into an assassin. Yeah,
right.
But the other side didn't know that, and then he was so indoctrinated that nobody could stop him.
Right.
And it's like when you look at the evidence that they present, and there are hundreds of these documents, there's no point going through them all, because all it is, well, this means this, and this means that, and this means the other. And it's not that that is just hearsay. This is somebody who was involved in those codes saying, yeah, that's exactly what it means.
Right.
But it's the fact of the influence that then began to spread. So if we kind of look at, so they assassinate a president, they pull Gorbachev through glasnost, then there's whole loads of other, like, apolitical, in inverted commas, institutions and individuals that Russia implants into America and Western society to kind of perpetuate and continue new myths. So, for example, after the Soviet Union collapses, the World Peace Council moves to Athens, and its honorary chairman is still this guy who is, he's called Ramesh Chandra, who was appointed. He's a sort of he has a non-aligned appearance. He has an apolitical Indian appearance, but in reality, he's a Soviet intelligence agent infiltrated into the National Committee of the Communist Party of India, one of the foreign communist parties most loyal to the Soviet Union at the time.
Wow.
So you have all of these backwards connections that people like us go, oh, well, look, this is a World Peace Council. What harm can it be? No, it's headed up by somebody from inside the Kremlin, basically.
Right.
And I think the denouement of this book is really these two paragraphs. In the early 1970s, KGB chairman Uri Andropov, the father of Russia's modern era of deceit, decided to turn the Islamic world into an explosive enemy of the United States. Islam and the Arab world were petri dishes in which the disinformation machinery could nurture a virulent strain of America hate from the bacterium, these are great words, of Marxist-Leninist thought. Islam's doctrine of soul-purifying jihad was the twin to our own soul-purifying romance with revolutionary nihilism. The Muslims' anti-Semitism ran deep. We only had to keep repeating our themes, that the United States was a Zionist country bankrolled by rich Jews who wanted to transform the rest of the world into a Jewish fiefdom. Islam was obsessed with preventing the infidels' occupation of its territory. It would be highly receptive to the dogma that American Zionism was the source of all evil. Muslims would instantly applaud our characterization of the US Congress as a rapacious Zionist body aiming to turn the world into a Jewish fiefdom. That would redirect the historic Arab and Islamic hostility, nationalism, and vulgar anti-Semitism to focus on the United States. Fervent anti-Semitism that would spread just the way the Soviets had intended. September 11th, 2001 is the proof we need. So,
wow.
It's like this whole book, and I can only précis bits of it, and you should go and buy it, and thank you to the authors for putting it to the world. And those extracts I've done, I've sort of selected to give you an idea of it. But basically, This is about how one part of one government in one part of the world has completely changed the way we think about our closest allies, ourselves, the society we live in, and what's involved, to the point where, if this is to be believed, so many people think that 9/11 is an inside job. What an amazing piece of propaganda to make people believe that you did it to yourself when that you were building this campaign as an enemy combatant for 40, 50, 60 years.
And if we go back to the JFK thing, so the authors of the book saying Congress, the Warren Report, all those things missed it, misinterpreted it, or just
missed it.
Right. So
they missed it.
It's not. It was so big and what's the word? Impactful that it was played down or ignored. They literally missed it, is what they're saying.
Yeah, it was opaque. It was a bizarre fairy tale with clues left in handwritten notes, and it seems so unlikely that it would be those handwritten notes would refer to anything other than the ramblings of a madman, that anybody who wanted to stand up and be taken seriously wouldn't take those things seriously until you get a foreign spy chief who says,
well, actually,
no, that was exactly what the notes I would expect to receive would say.
But again, I guess where I'm going with that thought is, even post the event, even now, if it comes clear that what the book is saying is true, it's still a difficult thing for the Americans, the Western governments, to kind of admit happened, because there's so much backlash and implications of, i.e. missing it, not retaliating when the Russians were involved in assassinating a president.
Yeah.
Even now, that's so controversial that it's probably safer and easier to not go there, right?
How on earth can you explain to the whole world, whoops, we missed it, here's the information, let me just bring up on this slide here this page where we missed these two references to Soviet handlers, and that ties to this other page where we missed this reference to Soviet handlers. You couldn't. People would just go, well, this sounds like you've made the whole thing up, mate. Yeah. And it's much easier to say, yeah, you would say that because it's a FBI inside job, isn't it?
I think the other thing that struck me when you were talking about Lee Harvey Oswald getting his training and the people that have trained him not knowing what he was being used for, all that kind of stuff, it made me weirdly think about the Nimitz and the Tic Tac UFO.
Yes, exactly.
Because we've talked about it in the past. I think I remember when the Pentagon released their statement on the Nimitz Tic Tac UFO. I think we sat there and said, well, there's either three things going on here. It's either a proper alien UFO encounter. It's either a foreign power that has incredible technology that, they're trying something out on a US training exercise. And then the third one was it's secret technology that the Americans have, and they're just testing it out on their own people who don't know about it. And I the more I've gone into the Nimitz story, the more I think it's the last one. A bit of me wants to think, well, it could have been a UFO encounter. I think if it was a foreign technology or an enemy technology, I'm not sure the Pentagon would make any statement about it at all.
No.
But when you hear of that, you could see that a group of people in the Navy or wherever doing a military training exercise, that someone in another department might go, this could be a good time to check out this secret technology we've got and see how it goes, without anybody else ever knowing. And then, it just makes you think of that. It really made me think of UFO disclosure, and then misinformation, even glasnost.
Yes.
Yeah, is there some UFO glasnost going on?
Well, I believed half the stuff that this document is telling me isn't true, and the sources are pretty good sources. So if I'm just hearing, with the best will in the world, people on, a news channel saying, we found a UFO and we're backwards engineering it, and it's from an alien civilization, I'm beginning to believe that because I want to believe it.
Yeah.
But as you say, it might be invented by our own military.
Yeah.
And they're pulling the wool over our eyes right in front of our faces.
Because then you kind of think, the recent whistleblower and even Bob Lazar to a degree, you could see how they may be being fooled either deliberately or by people who genuinely believe something that's not actually the case.
Absolutely. And it makes it so difficult to understand whereabouts on the spectrum the truth might lie. Because I've always thought there must be sub-truth in it.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, with these books, and certainly on the JFK one, there's the Stephen King novel, which, does some kind of fictional twists on the JFK thing, but he does a big write-up at the end of that book. It's the book, because the Americans do their dates the other way around, it's The Date of the Assassination is the name of the book. Stephen King goes into how much documentation he went through, and from my memory, I think he comes to the conclusion that Lee Harvey Oswald was acting as a lone agent. So you can kind of read this stuff in many different ways, can't you? You've got, prominent people who've spent a lot of time looking at it can go, no, it was definitely a lone agent, or go, no, it was definitely somebody internally at the CIA or the FBI who wanted to get rid of Kennedy. And then you've got this one. I think what's interesting about the book that you've just talked about is the coming together of two prominent people from both sides of the fence at the time of this thing, kind of going, that makes sense. That's really interesting, right?
That's what I think. That's why I found it so fascinating, because we haven't got anyone like that in any of the areas that we're talking about. I mean, very specifically the UFO area. Yeah. We don't have a really high intelligence person from, another perspective. If we had like a defected Chinese agent or something saying, no, we've been doing the same, and there was some evidence behind it, even if it was just sort of like paper evidence or film evidence, then it would seem a lot more credible. Just being told stuff by drip feed, it feels like that, we might be subject to what this book is talking about, but in a different sphere. And
bringing it back to UFOs, I mean, we've talked about it. I'm sure we've talked about it on the podcast, but we talk about it a lot outside the podcast as well. I believe Bob Lazar believes what he says, and has, what he's talked about, the drawings he's done, all those things. There is something there, but it's always struck me. It's, what's that legal term? The fruit of the poison tree. If the information, if he's being fed in information that's not correct, you're going to go with that narrative, and perfect for disinformation, because you've got somebody who's credible, who believes it, who's saying, look, this is what I believe, and this is what I saw, and this is what I've experienced. You know what I mean?
Yeah, very much so.
Because I know Bob Lazar has kind of hinted of, had he seen aliens, but I think he even discounts that a little bit. I went past, I think from my memory, he was like, I went past this kind of storage unit thing and I thought I saw someone experimenting on an alien, but
through a window,
but he admits I could have just seen something that I just didn't understand and didn't quite right. So if you take Bob Lazar as an example, his connection to UFO lore is what people working on the project have told him and what he's observed with his own eyes. But if you start from the premise of, oh, I'm backwards engineering alien technology, you know, of course you're going to believe that because what you're seeing is fantastical. But maybe you're just working on some, you know, terrestrial-based technology that's so advanced that it's actually easier almost to believe that it's alien technology, let alone being told that it is.
Yeah, I think so. And if it was either friendly or foe technology but Earth-based, this is the perfect cover.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, Ben.
But all roads point to Uri.
Yeah. So Uri kind of well, we don't know what Uri's view on it. He's just saying he's come across something and he believes. So he's not spoken. Yuri's not backed this up. He's just kind of hinted that it might be the case.
No. He said. So this is. I discovered this book off the back of his interview in 2017,
right. So,
saying it would have huge political consequences, and he's saying it's nothing to do with the FBI, the CIA, or anything like that. Right. I mean, this feels like this might be what he's talking about.
Yeah. You know, the only way we can ever solve this?
Meet Uri Geller?
I was thinking we could get Sherlock Holmes on the case.
It's time for a Sherlock update.
Shall we do a little update on the... that was fascinating, by the way. It was... I think those stories are fascinating because the JFK thing is a fascinating enigma in itself. But when you actually think about those, what you've talked about today, the misinformation, even people within Russia and all the organizations not having the full information, that's part of it. I just think is fascinating how it relates to other things. But let's get back to the TQM Tulpa project. So regular listeners will know we've had this project to see if we can turn Sherlock Holmes from a fictional character into something real. We've had many of you sending in your strange experiences that have been connected with Sherlock since we launched the project. We did have something from one of our listeners called Faye a few weeks ago who had a weird experience, and they've had some more Sherlock weirdness, Ben.
Oh, what's happened?
Faye got in contact on Facebook and they said, I'll just read out. Hi guys, my work has a yearly social team building event. Every year since 2016, it has been at the Crystal Maze live experience event in London. This year, they have selected the Sherlock Holmes escape rooms in Shepherd's Bush. So they've been doing it for years. I asked why they had changed to Sherlock, and the boss couldn't explain it. So weird. But, Ben, the weirdness didn't end there for Faye. They go on to say, this is really strange, additionally, when I spoke to my boss about the Sherlock escape room team building evening and the timings to organise it, etc., the lights above my desk began flickering. When the conversation about Sherlock concluded, the lights remained steady as always. This was very freaky.
That is quite a story. What she doesn't know...
There is more freakiness,
There
right?
is more freakiness. You and I both worked on the Crystal Maze TV show.
Yeah, as Ben said, before changing to the Sherlock Holmes experience, their company team did the Crystal Maze in London. And the weird thing about that is, yeah, as Ben was saying, a few years ago, both Ben and I did some work on the Crystal Maze. And also, we did some work on the Crystal Maze live experience as well, right?
Yeah.
So
that's weird.
That is so weird. So you've had this thing where the company have changed from the Crystal Maze to Sherlock Holmes. In a way, we've changed from the Crystal Maze to Sherlock Holmes. And then Faye had these kind of weird lights flickering when talking about Sherlock that disappeared afterwards. So there's a whole multitude of TQM Tulpa Sherlock Holmes weirdness in that, isn't there?
Faye, we should probably either meet and write down everything we know or never meet because it'll be super dangerous.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if you remember, Faye was the one who said they're putting minimal effort into the project. And we said...
That's still the best phrase.
And we said the other week, maybe that's the way of doing it, putting minimal effort. It's certainly working for Faye. But yeah, that weird connection with us and the Crystal Maze thing is quite strange.
I love that. Thanks, Faye.
Yeah.
Let us know how that goes as well. I'd love to know what a Sherlock Holmes escape room is like. I can imagine, but it'd be quite cool to know whether you liked it.
Yeah, and if you're allowed, maybe send us some photos that we can put on social media.
Oh yeah, if you're allowed, that'd be great.
Yeah. So yeah, keep thinking about your weird Sherlock. I haven't had anything Sherlock related happen to me this week. I don't know if you have.
No, not this week. Sadly.
Yeah. Well, keep thinking Sherlock and letting us know your stories, because it seems a bit like, because we've got the lights and stuff going on there. You know, we've had the coincidences. The light thing does seem like we're getting some other activity going on. That I did think that we start off with weird coincidences and then kind of move up a level into other kind of phenomena, but we seem to be getting a bit of other phenomena going on.
I'm quite enjoying other phenomena.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Ben, and thank you all for listening. As we said at the top of the show, we have got our Patreon program up and running now, so if you do want to support us, go to patreon.com/TQM pod and try and help us out if you can. That'd be fantastic.
Thank you. Please do that. Please leave us a review. And just a reminder, if you're interested in reading more about that book I was talking about, it's called Operation Dragon, and I bought it off Amazon, but it seems to be quite widely available. It's recently published. So go and repay the authors for their excellent research work.
Perfect. Okay, well, we'll be back next week with more quantum mechanics weirdness. And have a good week, and we'll see you then.
See you soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Are you the quantum mechanics?